Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Friday, 9th May 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. Amidst escalating tensions, India accuses Pakistan of cross-border attacks and supporting terrorist groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, allegations Pakistan denies. India claims to have thwarted missile and drone strikes by Pakistan targeting Indian-administered Kashmir, Punjab, and Rajasthan. Pakistan claims it brought down 25 Indian drones over cities, including Karachi and Lahore. Millions in cities near the border in both countries are on edge amid blackouts and explosions, causing civilian casualties and mass evacuations. International concern is rising, with the U.S. emphasizing de-escalation and Iran and Saudi Arabia urging restraint, fearing the conflict could escalate, especially given both nations' nuclear arsenals. The Indian Premier League was suspended for a week, and the Pakistan Super League moved to the United Arab Emirates. India has suspended flights at 24 airports and increased security at ports and shipping terminals. Turning to India, Meta banned the major Muslim news page, @Muslim, on Instagram at the government's request, citing restrictions against content violating local law. The account had 6.7 million followers. Indian ambassador to the U.S., Vinay Quatra, stated that India is at war with terrorists. India and Chile signed terms of reference for a new trade deal. India's bilateral trade with Chile was $3.60 billion. In 2024-25, Hindustan Aeronautics, an Indian defense firm, stated sensitive British technology stayed in India and was not resold. Also in India, an online job hunt by a woman was described as extremely creepy and sparked concern about cyber harassment. Focusing on Pakistan, the military claims to have brought down 25 Indian drones over cities, including Karachi and Lahore, amidst escalating tension. Pakistan has rejected India's claims of supporting Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed. Shifting to Sri Lanka, a cabinet spokesperson stated that no country will be allowed to use Sri Lankan territory against another amidst rising India-Pakistan tensions. In the United Kingdom, government officials defended the Free Trade Agreement, FTA, with India, calling it the biggest trade agreement the UK has signed with a single country since leaving the European Union. The World Bank president, Ajay Banga, clarified the World Bank's role in the Indus Waters Treaty, emphasizing it is only a facilitator amid India-Pakistan tensions. Japan is navigating a challenging economic environment marked by a 0.1% decrease in household spending for FY 2024, influenced by persistent inflation and consumer budget concerns, especially regarding food. Real wages also experienced a 2.1% year-on-year drop in March, the third consecutive monthly decline, as income growth fails to keep pace with rising prices. Nominal wage growth slowed to 2.1% year-on-year, a deceleration from February's revised 2.7%, signaling potential concerns for the Bank of Japan. The government has dismissed the possibility of cutting consumption tax to mitigate inflation and U.S. tariffs. 3 major Japanese shipping companies anticipate significant profit declines due to an expected decrease in auto and goods transport, affected by U.S. tariff policies. Corporate governance is expanding in Nagoya, Japan's industrial hub, and home to major corporations like Toyota and Denso. Discussions are ongoing regarding potential successors to current Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. Princess Kako is scheduled to visit Brazil starting June 4th, following her earlier trip to Greece in May 2024. Slam poetry is gaining popularity, with Japanese poets showcasing their talents internationally. Manga icons such as Sailor Moon are being utilized to educate foreign tourists on proper train etiquette, addressing complaints from over 60% of Japanese train users about tourist behavior. Outgoing International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach has indicated Japan is welcome to bid for future summer or winter games once corruption issues are resolved. Phantom Expo ticket from 1940 allowed a man access to the Osaka 2025 World Fair. 3 Chinese men were apprehended for attempting to smuggle 160 kg of hermit crabs, popular as pets in China, out of the country. Turning to the United Kingdom, Japanese battery manufacturer AESC is set to construct a second gigafactory in Sunderland, supported by £1 billion in funding, including a £680 million guarantee from the UK government. Meanwhile, in the United States, the US has advised Japan against comparing its tariff negotiations to those of the UK, suggesting that progress with many nations will be slow and complex. In Australia, Japan and Australia have agreed to strengthen their energy and security cooperation within the Trans-Pacific Partnership (TPP) framework. Finally, Panasonic is planning to reduce its global workforce by 10,000 positions, focusing on roles within consolidated companies. This includes 5,000 job cuts in Japan and 5,000 overseas, as the company pivots to new growth areas and divests underperforming businesses. China's export sector showed surprising strength in April, growing by 8% despite recently imposed U.S. tariffs, although exports to the United States specifically declined by over 20%. This growth was driven by increased trade with other nations. China is also tightening export regulations on critical minerals, targeting smugglers to prevent illegal transshipments. In South America, Chinese electric vehicle maker Bide Company Limited and stainless steel producer Tsingshan Holding Group Company Limited have cancelled plans to construct battery material plants in Chile due to the sharp drop in lithium prices. NVIDIA intends to launch a modified H20 chip for the Chinese market in July to circumvent U.S. export restrictions. Domestically, China is building the Shuangjiankou Power Station in Sichuan Province, the world's tallest dam, with the first unit expected to generate electricity by year's end. Xi Jinping traveled to Moscow for Victory Day commemorations, marking his 11th visit to Russia, where he and Vladimir Putin characterized their meeting as in-depth, friendly, and fruitful. Their discussions centered on challenging U.S. dominance and reshaping the global order. During the visit, Xi attended Russia's Victory Day parade. China has also secured a deal to purchase Russian oil and gas after Europe reduced its supply during the Ukraine war, further cementing their relationship. China and Russia jointly accused the U.S. of increasing the risk of nuclear war and pledged to respond to threats collaboratively. In Southeast Asia, joint China-Cambodia military exercises will highlight technological advancements and troop capabilities, indicating defense modernization. The debated origin of the COVID pandemic, potentially from the wildlife trade, has fueled accusations between China and the United States regarding a lab leak. Finally, Chinese snooker fan Brother Yuan and 150 million others celebrated Zhao Shintong's win at the Snooker World Championships, viewing Zhao as a role model. Turning to the United States, trade negotiators from the US and China are scheduled to begin talks this weekend in Switzerland, marking the first high-level trade discussions between the two countries since President Trump's return to the White House. Donald Trump considered reducing tariffs on China from 145% to 80% prior to a weekend meeting aimed at de-escalating the trade war. Trump mentioned that an 80% tariff on Chinese imports seems right ahead of these high-level discussions. China is urging the US to lift tariffs before the talks, coinciding with the meeting between UE and Putin in Moscow. As previously mentioned, the debated origin of the COVID pandemic, potentially from the wildlife trade, has fueled accusations between China and the United States regarding a lab leak. In Russia, while Jinping's visit to Moscow for Victory Day commemorations, his 11th visit to Russia involved discussions with Vladimir Putin that both leaders described as in-depth, friendly, and fruitful. Their primary goal is to challenge U.S. dominance and reshape the world order. Xi Jinping also participated in Russia's Victory Day parade. The agreement between China and Russia for China to purchase Russian oil and gas following Europe's reduced supply due to the Ukraine war further strengthens their alliance. China and Russia are jointly accusing the U.S. of increasing the risk of nuclear war and pledging to respond to threats collectively. Finally, in Cambodia, joint military drills with China will showcase technological advancements and troop capabilities, signaling defense modernization within the region. Australia is seeing post-election leadership challenges in both the Liberal and National parties, with Susan Ley and Angus Taylor competing for the Liberal leadership and Matt Canavan launching a bid for the Nationals leadership. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is prioritizing legislation aimed at reducing student debt. Infrastructure improvements are underway, including a sixth and bicycle and pedestrian path set to link Cooks River to Sydney Harbour by 2025. In sports, field hockey player Tom Craig has been reinstated to the Australian national team after a suspension. Turning to the United States, Vice President J.D. Vance declared that the U.S. will not intervene in a potential conflict between Pakistan and India. Former President Donald Trump has announced a U.S. trade deal with Britain and has suggested a call with Xi Jinping regarding China. Institutional investors are increasing their holdings in Trump Media and Technology Group, TMTG. The U.S. has granted refugee status to 54 white Afrikaner South Africans, who are expected to resettle in Washington, D.C. Director Ava DuVernay has called on artists and historians to resist a criminal U.S. president. Pope Leo XIV's past criticism of Trump and Vance has ignited a MAGA backlash. The United Kingdom's trade deal with the U.S. has reportedly secured jobs at Jaguar Land Rover's plant in the West Midlands. China has extended congratulations to Pope Leo XIV and expressed a desire for continued dialogue with the Vatican. Despite US tariffs, Chinese exports have shown resilience in April. The Vatican's new Pope, Leo XIV, in his first Mass, criticized the overemphasis on technology, money, and success at the expense of Christianity. His brother, John Prevost, described him as politically moderate, but aligned with Pope Francis on concerns about US immigration policy. An art dealer, Orinokuko Ojiri, who was featured on BBC's Bargain Hunt, admitted to failing to report sales to Nazem Ahmad, a suspected Hezbollah financier. Lastly, CrowdStrike CEO announced a global workforce reduction of 5%, attributing the decision to AI efficiencies gained within the business. Russia commemorated the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany with a grand military parade in Moscow's Red Square, drawing leaders from more than 20 nations, including China and Brazil. President Vladimir Putin lauded the bravery of Russian soldiers in Ukraine during the event and promised triumph. The parade, featuring Chinese soldiers marching with Russian troops, showcased military strength amid continuing efforts to mediate the conflict in Ukraine. Kim Jong-un visited the Russian embassy, pledging to enhance North Korea-Russia ties. Former President Trump, while engaging with Putin, threatened additional sanctions if Russia did not agree to a longer truce with Ukraine, following a call with President Zelensky. Xi Jinping's presence in Russia and participation in the Victory Day parade in Moscow overshadowed China's diplomatic endeavors in Europe. This occurred as China-EU diplomatic relations reached their 50th anniversary. Chinese troops participated in the parade alongside Russian forces, further solidifying the image of Sino-Russian cooperation. The election of American Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost as Pope Leo XIV is being celebrated in Peru, where he previously ministered for 20 years and was granted citizenship in 2015. The 69-year-old Augustinian, who served as Bishop of Chiclayo for over a decade, is regarded fondly by many Peruvians. The Vatican's flag is prominently displayed at the Metropolitan Cathedral in Lima. Pope Leo XIV, born and raised in Chicago, and of French, Italian, and Spanish descent, demonstrated his strong connection to Peru by delivering his first address in Spanish, referencing his beloved diocese of Chiclayo. His election is considered a significant moment for Latin America. India reports heightened tensions with Pakistan, citing multiple attacks along its western border. These attacks, allegedly launched by Pakistan, using drones and other munitions on Thursday night and early Friday, impacted the entire western border region. Temporary flight suspensions occurred at 24 airports. The Indian Army claims to have successfully repelled the drone attacks. Pakistan denies attacking India-administered Kashmir, following explosions reported in Jammu city. The country dismisses India's accusations as baseless. Pakistan, conversely, accuses India of initiating waves of drone attacks. The aviation authority suspended operations at Karachi Airport until midnight. Amidst these allegations, a report by the South China Morning Post, CNP, indicates Pakistan claimed to have used Chinese-made J-10C fighter jets in a clash with India. This escalation, involving advanced weaponry and disinformation, has led to global calls for de-escalation. Adding to the complexity, Pakistan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs disavowed a post on the Economic Affairs Division's X account requesting foreign aid as fake. The ministry attributes it to a hacking incident. The post had appealed for loans due to alleged losses from India's Operation Sindoor. Israel's actions have escalated tensions in the region, with the closure of 6 UN schools for Palestinians in East Jerusalem completed on May 7. An Israeli military operation has displaced tens of thousands of Palestinians in West Bank cities, fueling concerns about potential annexation. Plans to capture more Gazan land and relocate civilians have intensified despair amid ongoing airstrikes. A building collapse in Rafah, southern Gaza, caused casualties among Israeli soldiers. Despite a dire humanitarian situation, 2 months after Israel blocked aid to Gaza, a new U.S.-Israel food distribution plan is under consideration, though the UN finds it unworkable. The U.S. claims a Gaza aid solution is near, while aid groups express deep alarm following a healthy attack. Foreign Minister Israel Katz promised strong retaliation against Iran, affirming Israel's right to self-defense. Iran's foreign minister has refuted allegations of Iranian involvement in a purported plot targeting the Israeli embassy in London. He has requested clarification and advocated for diplomatic dialogue on the issue. In a surprising turn of events, the United States has seen Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost elected as Pope Leo XIV, marking him as the 267th pontiff. Prevost previously led the dicastery for bishops under Pope Francis. Mitsubishi Motors Corp. in the United States is contemplating a joint venture with Nissan Motor Co. to manufacture sport utility vehicles at a Nissan facility. The goal is to mitigate the effects of U.S. tariffs. Meanwhile, Chinese exports to the United States fell by 21% in April. This decline corresponded with a rise in exports to Asia. The shift occurred after President Trump imposed substantial tariffs on China. Shifting to Britain, British Airways parent company, IA, has placed an order for 32 Boeing aircraft. The order is valued at $13 billion. This follows a confirmed trade agreement framework between Britain and the US designed to reduce tariffs. North Korea's Kim Jong unsupervised missile launches. The tests simulated nuclear strikes against US and South Korean targets. He blamed both nations for increasing regional hostility. South Korea's presidential campaign is now facing allegations of superstition. Conservative candidate Han Duck-soo has denied his wife's involvement with shamanism. Economically, a presidential frontrunner suggested that South Korea should delay a trade agreement with the US. This candidate further argued for a unified international strategy to address US tariffs. In a separate legal case, prosecutors are demanding a 30-year prison sentence for a man convicted of murdering his wife and hiding her body in a car. The defense argued he had diminished capacity due to depression. Several Chinese EV manufacturers, including BYD, Zeekr, and Deepal, intend to export electric vehicles to South Korea, challenging Hyundai and Kia. These exports could also improve the worldwide reputation of Chinese EVs. Turning to Indonesia, Hawaii may replace South Korea's LG in an $8.45 billion investment. This investment is for Indonesia's electric vehicle battery industry. This shift comes after warnings that LG Energy Solutions, LG's, withdrawal could jeopardize Indonesia's EV development goals. The Vatican is preparing for the inauguration of Pope Leo XIV on the 18th. The first American pontiff will meet with cardinals, Vatican officials, the media, the diplomatic corps, and the public. His election suggests a shift in global Catholic power. He overcame the challenge of being American to gain approval from Pope Francis. American church leaders support Pope Leo XIV and the continuation of Pope Francis' priorities. Pope Leo XIV now faces 7 divisive issues. He must also tackle the Vatican's complex finances and combat corruption. He strengthened his credentials by serving in a key Vatican post. Ukraine is embroiled in escalating tensions with neighboring countries. Ukrainian officials have accused Hungary of espionage, claiming to have discovered a spy ring seeking sensitive military data. Hungary has strongly denied these allegations. Conflict with Russia continues, with Ukraine reporting over 700 truce violations. The United States has approved a $310 million sale of F-16 parts and support to Ukraine. Former President Trump has called for a 30-day ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, threatening further sanctions if violated. Despite the ongoing conflict, Ukraine has ratified a minerals deal with the U.S. The French pavilion at the Architecture Biennale will address rebuilding war-torn Ukraine. South Africa is grappling with widespread outrage following the rape of a 7-year-old girl, WHAM sparking a national movement demanding justice and challenging the culture of shame. Under the Trump administration, officials had sought to bring white Afrikaner refugees to the U.S., alleging racial persecution, a policy distinct from broader refugee admission reductions. The first Afrikaners approved under this initiative were expected to arrive in the U.S. and can apply for refugee status. Additionally, the country mourns the passing of Kenneth Walker, a 73-year-old journalist renowned for his reporting on apartheid's brutality and his efforts to amplify ABC News coverage of Nelson Mandela. Germany's domestic intelligence agency is currently awaiting a crucial court ruling. This ruling will determine whether the anti-immigration Alternative for Germany, AfD party, will be officially classified as a right-wing extremist movement. In other news, newly appointed Foreign Minister Johan Wadeful has made his debut on the EU stage. Wadeful is prioritizing the cultivation of interpersonal relationships and emphasizing respect for Germany's closest allies. Turning to Russia, Moscow recently commemorated Victory Day. The celebration marked the 80th anniversary of the victory over Nazi Germany. President Putin used the event to project an image of strength and national unity. This demonstration occurred despite Russia's increasing international isolation because of the continuing war in Ukraine. Finally, the Vatican is reflecting on a pivotal era. The papacy of Pope Leo XIII, which spanned from 1878 to 1903, is being examined. This period saw the Church navigate its entry into the modern world, with Leo XIII emphasizing the Church's moral authority and its role in advocating for the rights of working people. Denmark has summoned the U.S. ambassador to address reports of increased U.S. intelligence gathering in Greenland. Greenland is a semi-autonomous Danish territory. Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen stated firmly that spying on allies is unacceptable. This underscores Denmark's frustration with the Trump administration's surveillance activities. The strained relationship is further complicated by President Trump's previous interest in buying Greenland. United States, academic freedom is under scrutiny, especially at Ivy League schools, following actions by former President Trump. The debate centers on the extent and limits of these freedoms. Meanwhile, former President Trump has unveiled a trade accord with the United Kingdom, intending to reduce tariffs and marking it as the first of several planned deals. Vatican City has a new leader as Pope Leo XIV. The first American pope has been chosen to take over from Pope Francis. Pope Leo XIV has promised to bring light to the world's dark nights upon his election. The United Kingdom has solidified its economic ties with the United States through a freshly minted trade agreement. Former President Trump announced the deal, which aims to lower tariffs between the two nations. The United Arab Emirates is under scrutiny following accusations of providing Chinese-made weapons to the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, in Sudan. Amnesty International's report alleges the UAE is arming the RSF, especially as the paramilitary group increases drone attacks on Sudanese army-controlled cities. The UAE has refuted these claims, denying any support to the RSF in the current conflict. Mexico is battling a significant measles outbreak, the largest in recent years, with health officials prioritizing vaccinations to curb the spread, especially within the affected Mennonite community. Concurrently, Mexico is representing its cultural heritage at the Venice Biennale, presenting a fantasy island exhibit centered around its historic chinampas, or floating farms. Sri Lanka mourns the loss of 6 military personnel after a helicopter crashed into a reservoir. The crew was preparing to execute a fast roping exercise after participating in several parades. Turning to Canada, a new peer-reviewed study challenges the existence of a suspected brain disease in New Brunswick. The study suggests misdiagnosis and the spread of misinformation may be responsible for earlier concerns. The province itself is now undertaking a reassessment of the cases. In the United States, Donald Trump has dismissed Librarian of Congress Carla Hayden through an email. Hayden, the first woman and African American in the role, was confirmed by the Senate in 2016. This action is consistent with the White House's tendency to remove individuals considered adversaries. Albania's political landscape is focused on the upcoming parliamentary elections scheduled for May 11, where Prime Minister Edi Rama seeks a fourth term amidst the country's efforts to join the European Union. Meanwhile, as Europe commemorates Victory in Europe Day, Algeria is grappling with the legacy of massacres committed during the colonial period. European companies in China report waning confidence despite efforts to mitigate tariff impacts. Simultaneously, the Philippines is probing allegations that sand from Manila Bay was used in Chinese military installations in the South China Sea. In trade news, President Trump has expressed interest in lowering tariffs on Chinese goods from 145% to 80% before trade negotiations in Switzerland. Adding to this, a Chinese businessman sought for embezzlement has been apprehended in Vietnam. Asian stock markets showed mixed performance, buoyed by optimism around potential China-US trade talks and a trade agreement with the UK. Croatia's city of Slavonski Brod was hit by severe thunderstorms, including large hailstones. In El Salvador, the Trump administration has invoked the state secrets privilege in the case of Kilmar Abrigo Garcia, who was wrongfully deported to shield the deportation from judicial review. Across Europe, Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te drew parallels between Taiwan's situation and pre-World War II Europe, stressing the importance of confronting threats to democracy. The first Balinese temple in Europe has opened near Amsterdam, built with materials from Indonesia and funded by the local Balinese community. A major power outage in the Iberian Peninsula has reignited debate in Spain about phasing out nuclear reactors for renewable energy. The European wind industry faces uncertainty stemming from Trump's policies, as the US had been a promising market for offshore wind development. Tragically, Fiji has mourned the death of rugby player Joshua Risouk, who died in a car accident in France. Iraq's prime minister is visiting Turkey to strengthen collaboration between the two nations. In Malaysia, Nurul Izzah Anwar, daughter of Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, is vying for the PTR's No. 2 position, rejecting accusations of nepotism. New Zealand has witnessed a rare event, Augusta snail laying an egg from its neck, a first for this threatened species. The Philippines is investigating if sand from Manila Bay dredging operations was used to build Chinese military installations in the South China Sea. Taiwan's president Lai Ching-te likened Taiwan to Europe before World War II, emphasizing the need to confront challenges to democracy while marking the end of World War II in Europe. Thailand's King Maha Vajiralongkorn presided over a ceremony marking the start of the rice planting season, honoring the country's farmers. Tunisia saw a Jewish jeweler attacked with an axe on the island where Africa's oldest synagogue is located, requiring hospitalization. The United States invoked the state secrets privilege in the deportation case of Kilmar Abrigo Garcia to El Salvador. President Trump has signaled willingness to lower tariffs on Chinese imports to 80% from 145% prior to trade talks in Switzerland. The European wind industry is facing uncertainty due to Trump's policies, as the US was once a promising market for offshore wind. Finally, in Vietnam, a Chinese businessman wanted for embezzlement has been apprehended. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.